Hey everyone, this is Scott from Forgot to Grow Up. Welcome to our Snowpiercer Season 1 Episode 2 Thoughts video. Just finished watching the latest episode of Snowpiercer on Netflix, and I'm just going to be sharing my general thoughts on the episode. So in this episode, we see the Snowpiercer train still go on, and we see that Layton is still investigating further into this murder, which seems to involve cannibalism. As well as the train experiences a little bit of extra rough weather, being hit by an avalanche, which causes a section of one of the cars where the butchers and where their livestock of cows was kept, which leads to a whole bunch of different problems, which we only start to see in this episode. So I really like this episode, the kind of kicking this second one off. I love that they immediately go into giving us problems that the train is dealing with, but also complications into the investigation of this, into the investigation Layton's leading. So I really enjoy kind of like, this balance of him learning more about the cart that he doesn't really know of, or about the train that he doesn't really know about, like the night cart, where he had this idea of, and you get this idea, especially when you first go in, it looks like a nightclub, and there's some, singing going on, and they're talking about these ladies taking men to the back, and you're like, is this a brothel? And then someone literally is like, it's never been a brothel, and you're like, oh, okay, I got the wrong idea, what is this? And then you go into this room, and it seems to be some kind of memory therapy thing, but it also gets confusing because Layton was hanging out with his old wife. So it's like, okay, maybe we could have had a different guide, but I guess that was about them reconnecting, and it also made sense considering his wife's working there. Why wouldn't she be the one to introduce him to what the night cart is? So that part was just was interesting to learn about the night cart. Seeing it just made me think about all the different carts we're going to get throughout this season. So there's 1,001 in total. We've seen at least one with this is the tail, and we know that there's the the main engine at the front. We know that there's different dining cars with first class. It looks like there's a different class levels, first, second, third. So I'm really curious to see what other ones we explore. We got the livestock one in this episode, so I am curious to see more and more of these things. And that's one of the things I'll be the most interested to check out as more episodes go forward, is like seeing these different carts, the different creative ways they can come up with it. You got the young people section, and it's kind of like a bohemian kind of feel to it, and I was like, oh, look at teenagers just being all cliche as always. I just like exploring these different cars. So this episode was fun for exploring a couple new ones. What do we see? Oh, another thing we saw at the very beginning of this episode is that last episode we had kind of we got a little bit of like a little hint to they took the train Wilford people would take arms from the tailies as kind of like a punishment, meaning like, and so we saw that happen in this episode. At first they were going to take a little child's arm, the little child that was involved in the riot last episode, and I'm just like, oh god, is no one going to step up and save the child? And the child's mom did, and the one lady had a nice line, which is, see, someone's got the moral fortitude to admit to what they did wrong. And it's kind of just like, it was a little bit of an ironic thing to say from them, but it was still kind of a fun kind of like pointing out that yes, you do want to see that kind of moral fortitude sometimes, especially when it involves a child. But yeah, then we see how they take these arms of people and they make them stick their arms outside and freeze off. And this is one thing that made me like, this episode actually did bring up one thing which made me want to like look up, like, how cold is cold? Like, I know they said it's 120 out, like 100 minus 120 out, and so like, I don't know, I think they said Fahrenheit or Celsius. It doesn't matter at that point. At that point, it's just freezing. So I don't know if I don't think that's quite absolute zero. I know that's not absolute zero, I'm fairly certain. But yeah, they do make it seem like it gets really cold. I know it's cold out. It was interesting to see a few of the times, especially when like the car where the cattle are being held, they just instantly freeze, and I'm like, is that how quick that would happen? I don't know. I've never been out, obviously, in minus 120 before, but I've been out in minus 40, so I don't know. It's hard for me to be like, I don't know 100%. I don't know how realistic that part is, that like how cold and how quickly everything freezes, but that's just a little nitpicky thing of like my science brain going a little like, but it was interesting to see how they stick the arms out to freeze the arms of the freezies, and then the tailies to smash off their arms as punishment for rebellions and stuff like that. Which to me it seems a little like, well, why don't you just you guys are complaining about the tailies being here, why don't you just, like, I'm not for, capital punishment, but this is also a fictional universe where they don't care about this thing, so I don't know why they wouldn't just do that as opposed to cutting off arms. But I guess it also makes sense for them to, they do sometimes use the tailies as resources in certain cases where they need like apprentices. We see at the end of this episode, because some of the butchers and cattle farmers who had died during the accident, they needed to bring in some new apprentices, and so they take some apprentices from the tailies, which is an interesting thing to see, and that kind of explains how the tailies have gotten people throughout the ship, and how they kind of have, not informants, but at least have people who they can kind of, they can then organize throughout the train, as opposed to just in the tail and trying to take over the whole thing from just the rear end. So this episode was really pretty interesting in exploring more elements of Snowpiercer in the train, and still setting up more of this mystery, because now we're like, okay, there seems to be two bits involved with this murder going on, which is there's the torture element of this person. The victim was tortured and then had his limbs cut off, and those limbs were taken off by the butchers, who were then, I guess, using that to feed the upper and middle class people and stuff like that, which was really funny, because last episode you also hear at one point one of the first class people, one of the children, she was like, I want to get noodles from section whatever, and then they're in section whatever today, and what's her name gets some noodles, and then he makes the connection of like instantly to, oh, y'all weren't eating beef, you were inhuman. And apparently that was because of a similar thing that happened in the tail section in the first few years, which was, there were, I guess, kill gangs, which were cannibals and kill people and eat them. And that story, I was just like, I don't know if he's messing with them or not, or if it was true. It was hard to say. I kind of like that he left it ambiguous too, because I'm just like, I don't know if you're actually a cannibal or not. How else would you know the fact that that beef wasn't beef? You know what I mean? How could he instantly be like, oh yeah, you guys thought you were having beef noodles, that was human noodles? So that was a little bit like suspect. But it was interesting, a fun little element too, because if he's joking about it, it's fun. If he's not, it's also kind of just like, oh shit, dark. So yeah, that was fun. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed this latest episode, and I'm very curious for the next episode to arrive on Netflix here in Canada, because here in Canada we get it on Netflix as opposed to TNT, which is, I believe, where it is in the US. So yes, I'll be checking that out. Be sure to let me know in the comments below what you thought about this latest episode. Thanks again for joining me. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and have a good one.